With November being National Military Appreciation Month, my guest this morning here on Jersey Magazine is Dr. Paul R. Lawrence, who's the author of Veterans Benefits for You. Get what you deserve. Dr. Lawrence, good morning and welcome back to Jersey Magazine.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Hey, thanks for having me back, and thanks for your continued focus on our veterans.
Well, I think it's so important. I'm the son of a World War II veteran, the grandson of two World War I veterans. So it is something that I am occupied with from time to time. What led you to become an activist and an advocate for veterans benefits?
Well, sort of the same way. I grew up in a military family. My father was in the Army. We traveled the world. I joined ROTC and I became a veteran after serving for my 3 years. After a long period of being a consultant, I had the chance under in the Trump administration to be the Undersecretary for Benefits at the VA. So I actually got to help veterans by administering their benefits. And so when I was there, I really saw like what these benefits mean to veterans, how it helps them pursue their life post-service, pursue their American dream. So I want to really make sure veterans understand they've earned all these things and they can really help them, in their life afterwards.
From your experience, what is one of the more overlooked benefits that veterans just don't even think about or even know about?
Well, there's a couple nuances. One, I would tell them, make sure you understand the value of the GI Bill, right? The education benefit. So obviously, we have so many veterans who've never gone to college. So it's the first time in their family they've ever gone to college. That's great. But a lot of folks have gone to college, or they say, college isn't for me. You can use it to get trading in the trades, for example. Fastest way to a $100,000 a year job, plumber, electrician, truck driver. You can use that for credentials. Imagine a credential now in cybersecurity and this time in the world. I was looking at some salaries. They started low six figures and they moved to mid six figures, in a job. So that's pretty good work for a certificate. So I would tell them about the benefits of the GI Bill, and I would also remind them about how the benefits can be available to your family if something happens to you. So it's not just for you, but also think about your family.
That's something that I did want to talk to you about. I don't know, when my dad passed, I know we got a military headstone. I have no idea what other benefits may or may not have come my mom's way, and she's passed as well. So it's not even like I can go and ask her. But for someone, when someone passes, one of the last things that you're thinking about is something like that because your mind is all over the place. In fact, I've told my wife numerous times, here's everything you need to know should I pass. Then I had to tell my three kids, here's everything you need to give mom because she's not listening to me right now. Because when that happens, your mind is just a jumble.
Well, the most important part of our time together might actually be for veterans what you just said. The best practice is exactly what you're talking about doing. Tell your family in advance about your VA benefits, what it'll mean. You'll be buried, you'll get a payment, you won't get a payment. But the last thing you want to do is exactly during a grief-stricken period, have someone find out, now I get to go deal with the world's biggest bureaucracy, the VA. This is like, double bad. So we tell people all the time, there are benefits available to the family under certain circumstances. Know this in advance, tell your family about it, get them all set up so that it's just another thing, when, as it'll happen to all of us, end of life takes place.
So when that does happen, what is the best way for a spouse and or a family member to handle that? Where should they go?
Certainly. Well, hopefully they'll have set this up in advance, right? The veteran will have told, let's assume it's a male, the husband will have told the wife, these are the benefits. This is likely what you'd be available for. Okay. A lot of veterans work with what's called a service officer, a veteran service officer. These are people at no cost who understand the VA system and know about benefits. So the very best practice has been the husband would introduce the wife to his service officer and say, look, if something happens to you, John Smith here can help you so that you understand. He has all the paperwork, he has all the forms ready. All you're going to have to do is sign it. And this is just going to be another thing you'll have to deal with as opposed to a real large issue.
Just a couple of minutes ago, you referred to the VA and bureaucracy. That's a big word for me to pronounce this early in the morning. How difficult is it to navigate the VA system?
Well, it can be hard or easy depending upon how well you prepared you are. So the example we're talking about, a grieving spouse wakes up and realizes, oh my goodness, I got to deal with it. And it often comes with financial pressure because if the husband's been injured, the family budget could be getting a pretty sizable check every month. The husband passes, the veteran no longer gets that payment. The family could be under duress. So the period of time which you deal with it could be really traumatic. The rules and procedures can be hard, but if you are prepared, you have all your documentation, and you get somebody to help you, it can be easy. Where people struggle is they're not prepared, they don't have the information, they haven't done any homework, and no one's there to help them. If you do this by yourself the first time, generally you're going to be dissatisfied.
I want to go back to something else that you mentioned a little earlier in our conversation this morning, Dr. Lawrence, and that would be, post COVID, a lot of people sitting around the house, and all of a sudden you're doing all this work that you've put off for for a period of time, and the trades became so important, whether you needed a plumber or an electrician or what have you. And I didn't even realize that veterans benefits, the GI Bill, could help with that sort of type of education.
Right. You can receive education and training from an apprenticeship, and the GI Bill will take care of that. You can receive it from a for-profit school, a trade school, and many of these are very, very good. They graduate their student veterans at a very high rate. So absolutely. And I think what we have to tell people is, listen, college is one path, but more and more people are figuring out it's not for them. Right. And that's good. If it's for you, it's good. But if it's not, there's all kinds of great opportunities. A few minutes on the internet, exactly what you said, Jim. Plumbers, electricians, truck drivers. I mean, the list just goes on about what people realize, and there is a shortage of them. So, you're in demand, and let's be honest, these jobs can't be outsourced. So it's really great. And I encourage all veterans, think about that. And some of those jobs you might have already been trained for while in service. So it could be a pretty easy transition.
Not only can they not be outsourced, artificial intelligence can't repair a toilet, you
That's
know?
exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think from the surveys, people who work with their hands in the trades have a very high level of satisfaction, which often, if you're an office worker, you don't. You generally know you go home, I can't take this work home with me. I can look and point in something and say, I did that. And I don't know about you, whenever a plumber comes to my house, we thank them profusely. So I've got to think the job satisfaction is high.
Yeah, I try to do a bunch of, home projects myself, but there is a point where I just say, this is well above my pay grade. I have to get somebody who knows what he or she is doing.
Right. And we seldom look at the price anymore. It is what it is. And so that's a great field to be in when people aren't looking at the price.
How did veterans benefits change after 9/11?
So one of the big changes happened in the GI Bill. The GI Bill, the education benefit has been changed a couple times to make it more aligned with what veterans are experiencing. So for example, the payment used to get for expenses used to be a function of your campus, but now we know veterans are doing internships and traveling, and so their connection to the campus is not so obvious. We know veterans are doing much more online, so there's an understanding of that, and also just the different careers. And finally, the most important change is the GI Bill used to be yours for 15 years after you left the service. So if you weren't paying attention after the 15th year, you didn't get the GI Bill anymore. 2017, President Trump signed a law that made it forever. So when you leave now, you can get the access to your GI Bill benefit forever. So that's a really big change in terms of coming back later from education, even if you're much older than you otherwise would have been.
One of the other things that I think is really important, and I don't think it matters whether you served in a combat situation or not, when you transition out of the military back into civilian life, that's a big change to your system. And again, whether or not you were in combat, certainly there are differences in both, but you come from a very, very regimented lifestyle. And all of a sudden, here you are back in the world, if to use a term that some military veterans use. And I don't think you can underestimate the importance of that transition.
Absolutely, you're right. However you served in the military, you were in a very specialized team. You learned a language, you learned how to work together, you learned a special mission. And even though you weren't in combat, you trained as if you might have been in combat, regardless of what you did. So you learned a special thing. And the transition back to civilian life is a challenge. What generally people are told is begin a year and even earlier to think about what that transition will be. Prepare, understand your benefits, figure out what you want to do, get a job. That's one of the most important things I remind people. Nothing is more sort of challenging as being part of this great team and then one day leaving the military and being disconnected. That's when potentially bad things can happen. So always remind people, get a job. Leave the military, return, have a job that will start you with connectivity. It might not be the job you have forever, but you'll have a team and you'll have many of the similar things in your life. So absolutely prepare early, think about what makes sense for you and your family, and then where you want to live. The benefits by state are very different for veterans. So you should really shop around and make sure, you're where you want to be.
The book is called Veteran Benefits for You. Get What You Deserve. Dr. Lawrence, for listeners who want to learn more, where can they go?
Absolutely. You can get the book on Amazon and you can follow me on LinkedIn where I post things about veteran content, resources, and programs under my name, Paul R. Lawrence.
Dr. Paul R. Lawrence, thank you once again for joining us here on Jersey Magazine.
Thank you, Jim.